Hi, my name is Arthur and welcome to Celestial Wellbeing. Today's word I've chosen is fear. Now, this is a really interesting word, and the first thing I notice about this word is it's a word to describe such a feeling that words can't really describe, because this affects us all in a very unique and individual way. Yet it does have an overall similarity attached to it. Also, I find that it's more than just a word to express a certain feeling or emotion, but it's also kind of a concept in itself as well. So while exploring this word, I've been exploring this word for a few weeks now, and it's interesting to notice how much effort and how much thought I've put into this word and how much it's actually brought up for myself, and it's made me aware of all fears that I was not aware of. And so what I've realized is all fears kind of break down into two main categories, and one of them is natural fear, and then the other is unnatural fear. And what I find interesting about the difference between these two is natural fears are more responsive fears rather than thought-produced fears. And so what I mean by more responsive, they're more physical. So the human body itself, its main purpose is to keep you alive, and it has its own built-in survival instinct that whether you're conscious of it or not, it's going to do regardless of whether you're thinking about it or not. So, a natural fear would be being attacked by an animal or another person, being physically hurt, physically falling off something, so you're standing close to an edge, and you don't want to fall. Your body responds to that, and it actually takes over your entire being, because its internal instinct is just to survive. It's really simple. So if you bring everything back in the natural category and you relate it to just survival, then all your natural fears come from that. So natural fears could be safety, love, being hurt physically, as well as emotionally. And then even if we just look at safety in a natural state, to be housed, to be sheltered, safety around your family, and so on and so on. But then when we look at the unnatural side of things, it becomes a little different. A lot of unnatural fears come from the mind. Yeah? So what kind of unnatural fears that are not present in our everyday can we concoct in our minds? And where do a lot of these unnatural fears come from? So what kind of things can unnatural fears create? And where do they come from? So let's say the news, for example, through war. The news likes to promote war, and it likes to promote terror. Now, regardless whether you believe this or not, it does play a role. And the unfortunate thing about the human mind is it cannot reject anything. So even though you hear these stories, it doesn't matter if you choose not to believe them or not, the mind still accepts them, whether you like it or not. And the body may still respond as if in a physical threat. So what else? We have schooling. So school will, they put a lot of pressure on us, and they put a lot of fear into us. If you don't get good grades, you will be punished. Yeah, like school's great for punishment. If you don't do well, you're going to get poor grades. If you get poor grades, you won't be able to succeed in life, and you won't be able to succeed in future. It goes back to the natural fears and the natural survival instinct. Yeah? Because in this society, to have a healthy income and to have a safe home is part of this survival in this era. So what else? Let's say movies, TV. Now the funny thing about movies and TV is they're full of mind fears, yeah? So they actually teach us how to respond. And again, if we go back to the mind cannot reject anything, yeah? So there may be a story in a movie that sets up a scene, and that scene ends up, in disaster. And the actor acts out his response or her response to that disaster. And by doing so, the mind cannot reject anything, absorbs this information. And then, chances are, if you're in that similar situation in real life, there's a strong chance that you will respond as you've been taught. So that's a little different to unnatural fears, but that's a real big player. And they also instill a lot of fears. We've got war movies, we've got horror movies. In fact, TV, even these days, we've got reality TV, we've got cop shows, we've got busts at airports, we've got whodunit, and there's a lot of whodunits. But anyway, we'll save that one for another one. Parents can push, mind fears onto us as well, and, they're not at fault, and they're doing it innocently and possibly without even knowing it. Because if we go back to the natural survival of things, our parents want us to be able to survive. So they unknowingly project their fears on us without realizing what they're actually doing. And so we take on those fears as if they're ours. We don't know the difference because the mind cannot reject anything. Unfortunately, you cannot create, well, not that I know of yet, but you can't create amnesia on something you don't want to hear or remember. It's, as far as I know, it's not possible. But that'd be great. That'd be a great thing to have. So, let's look at the human body. Actually, before we get to the human body, what I've realized is unnatural fears all relate to other people. So, like I showed there, it could be through the news, it could be through schooling, it could be through parenting, your peers, so on and so on and so on. And they're all other people related. There is probably not a single fear that has not come from someone else somewhere along the way. So you could create a massive chain of how that fear works, and it'll always relate back to somebody else. So the funny thing about the human body is, if you're faced in a natural fear response, so let's say you're walking your dog and another dog approaches you, but this dog's really aggressive, yeah, and it wants to attack. Straight away, the body will alert, danger, 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 yeah? So the body will respond to survive, just like that. And more than likely, the body will respond before a message is sent to the mind, right? So, if we look at an unnatural, kind of works the other way. It starts with the mind, and then the body will respond. Can you see the difference? There's a very slight difference, but both responses are so infinitely fast that you kind of can't tell the difference between the mind or the body, which one responds. With practice, you will be able to distinguish the two. So just going back, so in a very natural fear-related scenario, the body will respond first and then relay to the mind. An unnatural fear will start in the mind, just a thought, and then the body will respond. Yeah? And so what's interesting about this kind of scenario is how strongly it's linked to things like anxiety, which I will do a video on down the track. Because really anxiety is just a survival mechanism and the body responding to that. And that's why it may feel really uncomfortable and make you feel really shitty, because your body is like ready to defend itself, but there's nothing to defend itself against. So it's all this energy that's being pushed into the body and it's not being used. So what can you do? So practice always makes perfect. And when it comes to the emotion of fear, learning your body and how it responds to things is a great way to start. So going back, we've got unnatural fear, which is always other people related, yeah? And then we've got natural fear, which speaks for itself. So let's go back. We're going to draw a line down the middle here. So if you're working with unnatural fears, every time you feel your body respond or you're feeling uncomfortable, think about what it is that you're thinking about. I know that sounds a bit crazy, but really give it some thought and see what thoughts are actually triggering a body response. Yeah? And if you can, in a natural sense, try and pick out a moment in your lifetime where you have felt physical fear and it's been really obvious. And if you recall that, and the funny thing about the mind is it has no problems recalling emotions and feelings just like that at will. So try and recall a moment where you were in a fear state and relay it. And the interesting thing here is the two feelings will be really similar, like really similar. Not the same, but very similar. And so the exercise here is to try and distinguish the difference between the two feelings, yeah? Because once you understand what's triggering unnatural fear responses, then you can start to undo them, yeah? It's the only way that I know of that you can undo it. Ignorance doesn't work in this case, because if you ignorantly look at these feelings and just try and push them away and just try and ignore them, they're always existing, and all you're doing is learning to live with them. You're not actually removing them, you're not curing them, you're just band-aiding them. So with practice, even if you write down a list and make 2 columns, an unnatural and a natural, and then write down times that you've been in natural responses and then times where you're in unnatural responses, just thought process stuff, and then just sit and meditate on each one. Okay, what's going on with my physical body here? Okay, now try the other response, what's going on there, and try and distinguish the two feelings, because then as you travel through life, you'll be able to recognize these things quite easily with practice though. So fear's a real interesting one, perfectly natural. And I hope this video has helped, and thank you.